Yes, it's the Book of Days. Hello, I'm San Bardo of Lesser Lombardy. Today is March 11th, a very good day, I might add, for the Book of Days. Born Torquato Tasso, Italian poet, in 1544 in Sorrento. Died on this day Hannah Cowley, a dramatic writer, in 1809. It is a feast day of St. Constantine of Scotland, martyr in the 6th century. St. Agnes the Culdee, bishop in Ireland, it's his feast day as well, in Ireland, 824. Some fascinating things to remark on today. On the 11th of March, 1618, two women named Margaret and Philippa Flower were burnt at Lincoln for the alleged crime of witchcraft. With their mother, Joan Flower, they had been confidential servants of the Earl and Countess of Rutland at Belvoir Castle. Dissatisfaction with their employers seems to have gradually seduced these three women into the practice of hidden arts in order to obtain revenge. According to their own confession, they had entered into communion with familiar spirits by which they were assisted in their wicked designs. Joan Flower, the mother, had hers in the bodily form of a cat, which she called Rutterkin. They used to get the hair of a member of the family and burn it. They would steal one of his gloves and plunge it in boiling water or rub it on the back of Rutterkin, the cat, in order to effect bodily harm to its owner. They would also use frightful imprecations of wrath and malice towards the objects of their hatred. In these ways they were believed to have accomplished the death of Lord Ross, the Earl of Rutland's son, besides inflicting frightful sicknesses upon other members of the family. Beware, beware the Witches of Belvoir. Margaret Flower, on being examined, acknowledged that she had stolen the glove of the young heir of the family and given it to her mother, who stroked Rutger with it, dipped it in hot water, and pricked it, whereupon Lord Ross fell ill and suffered extremely. In order to prevent Lord and Lady Rutland from having any more children, they had taken some feathers from their bed and a pair of gloves, which they boiled in water mingled with a little blood. In all these particulars, Philippa corroborated his sister. Both women admitted they had familiar spirits which came and sucked them at various parts of their bodies, and they also described visions of devils in various forms which they had had from time to time. Yes, indeed, those days of witchcraft you would think were over, but there are still stories of similar people of like persuasion. The first daily paper, the British journal entitled to this description, was the Daily Courant, commenced on the 11th of March in 1702 by Mallet's against the ditch at Footbridge, a site we presume very near that of the present Times office. The very first daily newspaper, 1702, March 11th. It was a single page of 2 columns and professed solely to give foreign news. Foreign news. Try to find foreign news in a small-town local newspaper these days. Good luck. The editor or publisher further assuring his readers that he would not take upon himself to give any comments of his own, supposing other people to have sense enough to make reflections for themselves. Sense enough to make reflections for themselves. On that, too, they were way ahead of themselves, those first publishers of the first daily. The Luddites. Who makes the quartern loaf and Luddites rise? Quote James Smith. March 11th, 1811 is a black-letter day in the annals of Nottinghamshire. It witnessed the commencement of a series of riots which, extending over a period of 5 years, have perhaps no parallel in the history of a civilized country for the skill and secrecy with which they were managed and the amount of wanton mischief they inflicted. The hosiery trade, which employed a large part of the population, had been for some time previously in a very depressed state. This naturally brought with it a reduction in the price of labor. During the month of February 1811, numerous bands of distressed framework knitters were employed to sweep the streets for a paltry sum to keep the men employed and to prevent mischief. But by the 11th of March, their patience was exhausted, and flocking to the marketplace from town and country, they resolved to take vengeance on those employers who had reduced their wages. Such spirit of labor vengeance is dead in these United States. The timely appearance of the military prevented any violence in the town, but at night no fewer than 63 frames were broken at Arnold, a village 4 miles north of Nottingham. During the succeeding 3 weeks, 200 other stocking frames were smashed by midnight bands of distressed and deluded workmen, who were so bound together by legal oaths and so completely disguised that very few of them could be brought to justice. These depredators assumed the name of Luddites, said to have been derived from a youth named Ludlum. who, when his father, a framework knitter in Leicestershire, ordered him to square his needles, took his hammer and beat them into a heap. Good for you, young man Ludlam. The Luddites, early civil, social, labor rebels. Biting the thumb, our next category. In Romeo and Juliet, the servants of Capulet and Montague commence a quarrel by one biting his thumb, apparently as an insult to the others. And the commentators, considering the act of biting the thumb as an insulting gesture, quote the following passage from Decker's Dead Term in support of that opinion. "What swearing is there?" says Decker, describing the groups that daily frequented the walks of St. Paul's Church. "What shouldering, what jostling, what jeering, what biting of thumb to beget quarrels, aye." Sir Walter Scott, referring to the subject in a note to the Lay of the Last Minstrel, says, "To bite the thumb of the glove seems not to have been considered upon the border as a gesture of contempt, though so used by Shakespeare, but as a pledge of mortal revenge." Be wary of the next time you bite your thumb at someone. You fear you might be misconstrued. It is very probable that the commentators are mistaken, and the act of biting the thumb was not so much a gesture of insulting contempt as a threat, a solemn promise that at a time and a place more convenient, the sword should act as the arbitrator of the quarrel, and consequently a direct challenge, which by the code of honor of that period the other party was bound to accept. Imagine if such codes of honors were still in place every time someone insulted you. Crossed my mind on a few occasions. And then lastly, let's talk about the Butchers Seranade. Hogarth, in his delineation of the marriage of the industrious apprentice to his master's daughter, takes occasion to introduce a set of butchers coming forward with marrow bones and cleavers, and roughly pushing aside those who doubtless consider themselves as legitimate musicians. We are thus favored with the memorial of what might be called one of the old institutions of the London vulgar, one just about to expire, and which has, in reality, become obsolete in the greater part of the metropolis. The custom in question was one essentially connected with marriage. The performers were the butcher's men, the bonny boys that wear the sleeves of blue. A set of these lads, having duly accomplished themselves for the purpose, made a point of attending in front of a house containing a marriage party, with their cleavers, and each provided with the marrow bone wherewith to perform a sort of rude serenade, of course with the expectation of a fee in requital of their music. Sometimes the group would consist of 4, the cleaver of each ground to the production of a certain note. But a full band, one entitled to the highest grade of reward, would be not less than 8, producing a series of notes, a complete octave. And where there was a fair skill, this series of notes would have all the fine effect of a peal of bells, a cleaver choir, a cleaver orchestra. With this serenade happened in the evening, when it did, the men would be dressed neatly in clean blue aprons, each with a pretentious wedding favor of white paper in his breast of hat. Fascinating anecdotes from the past and mischievous miscellanea from the Book of Days Project on this March 11th. Thank you for joining us. Come join us again.